What's important to me? What is God inviting me into? How do I become a healthier person? What are the facts? What are the roots? How am I contributing to some of these relationships? What strategies am I trying that aren't working? I need to be honest about that and face that. What are the ways I shame myself? All of that is the internal work of getting stronger. And this is how we show up in our relationships in a much more powerful way.
Hey everybody, Tim Timmons here. Welcome to another 10,000 Minute Podcast. This one's terrible, so I would just skip it. Just kidding, you guys. This is a beautiful episode with Dr. Alison Cook. So again, this is 10,000 minutes. So there are 10,080 minutes in a week. 80 of those minutes we spend in some church gathering. For the next 10,000 minutes, we are just in the world, and that's when stuff hits the fan. Like life actually happens in the 10,000 minutes, not when we're gathered as the church. And so it's when we're scattered as the church. And so what's it look like for us to not work for God in the 10,000 minutes, but to like join him in our relationships, in our conversations, in how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we see God. So this series is all about relationships, and this really is a great episode. We also have Kelsey Grimm, who we've had in our past episodes. I think she was in season 1 or 2. Don't quote me on that, but she was, and she's amazing. I just love her and her husband as humans, and I'm like, you need to come hang out, because we were writing a song the day before. I'm like, would you just come be with me? You'll love the conversation with both these girls. They're hilarious. So Dr. Alison Cook, everybody, she is a psychotherapist, which just put that on your resume. I mean, I am too. I just don't have any studies to back it up. She's an author, an online educator, host of the Best of You podcast. Through her email outreach and podcast, Dr. Alison connects with over 60,000 individuals weekly, merging faith and psychology to bring tangible life changes. Dr. Alison walks us through toxicity in relationships and how to distinguish fact from fiction. Everybody, we all know these toxic relationships, whether we've been a part of them, whether I've been a part of making them happen, I've been the toxic person, or even in my parenting, there are moments when I become the toxic person in the relationship. And then we know toxic people and people that have toxic relationship tendencies. So this is distinguishing fact from fiction, like the narrative we're talking through that we believe and then actually what's going on. This is so important for us. We also dive into her new book, I Shouldn't Feel That Way is the book title. What's hard, tame your guilt, and transform self-sabotage into brave action. Okay, check out our show notes for more information on Dr. Alison Cook. And if you guys are loving season 3, please subscribe to this or tell your friends about it. And again, you guys, the whole point of this is that we'd be putting things into practice, not just that we go, ooh, that's a really cool concept. Ooh, that's a good word, good Christian word. But we join Jesus actually in our week. And this isn't just like a ploy to like get you to get our numbers up, which would be wonderful. But who are you doing this with? And would you listen to this with somebody and then have a conversation? Or else we're just kind of wasting our time. And we could just do self-help stuff. But this is like us being Jesus to each other and with each other and joining Jesus in this communal way of being reshaped and rethinking relationships. If you guys want to be a part of the 10,000 Minute community, we send out special emails to anybody who's partnering with us financially. Go to 10,000minutes.com. We've got ways for you to give there, and then we send out emails to you guys. We send out emails to everybody, but special ones to people who are partnering with us just because we're so grateful. It's kind of like our Patreon, but it's tax deductible. What? So if you've got $8,000 and you're like, you know what? I just want to give this away because these guys are doing good work. Then please do. That would be amazing. If you want to get our weekly text messages, go to the show notes. That's a lot of talking, a lot of Tim. That's like 5 minutes of Tim. Okay, now you're going to get another hour. Okay, thanks you guys. Enjoy this. Please let us know how this goes. Alison, welcome to the 10,000 Minute Podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know you are so thrilled. This is your favorite podcast to listen to, so that's what means so much to me. Alison, this is Kelsey Grimm, and she is married to Caleb Grimm, and they make out, and they're a really great couple, and they sing real well. And I love them as humans, so I've invited Kelsey to co-host this sucker with me. So she'll probably have way cooler things than I will to say, so I'll just let both you girls mostly talk.
I absolutely will. Yes, he's
Alison, you have one L.
I do. That is
She's a
true.
1L Allison.
1L.
Because 2 L's, it's
The
like
second one seems redundant.
totally.
That's my thought. What is the purpose of
Allison?
it? But I tell
Yeah.
you what, my whole life, it's always, nope, 1L. I'm the outlier, but I feel like it's the more pragmatic approach.
Yeah, no, that's right. That feels good. My
Absolutely.
wife is Hillary, and it's just 1L.
Oh,
And it's kind of like, who needs 2 L's? It's boring. Takes more
Yeah.
time.
That's right.
Okay, you live in Boston.
Most of the time, split time in Wyoming, which is where I'm from originally. 2 very different worlds. Yes.
Okay.
I was going to say, you could not be further apart.
Not further.
You're in either one of those places from your
Yep.
other home.
Yep. Yeah.
That's wild.
No, you have one of my favorite restaurants in the world there in Boston.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one?
It's called Cafe Bonjour. It's
Oh, I
downtown.
don't know it.
Girl, do you live anywhere near downtown?
Yes. No, I was just down there.
Okay,
I
let's be
recorded
friends.
my audiobook on Newberry Street.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Cafe Bonjour is the best breakfast you'll have in your lifetime.
Where
I'm
is
pretty
it?
much guaranteeing that. It's
Okay,
downtown.
all right.
It's right near the square. It's
Yeah. Okay.
we basically go to Boston just to eat there. So
I'll look
Just
it
for
up.
breakfast.
just for breakfast.
Just
I'm not kidding.
breakfast.
I wish I was
Okay.
kidding. I wish I was being silly.
Okay.
I'm
I've
not.
never been to Boston, and I hear amazing things. So it's a
It's a-
giant disappointment that I've never experienced it. But I would love
It's
to go.
a great city. It's a great city. I just walked it the other day. I did my audiobook on Newberry Street. You can walk the whole city. I walked through the Common, Cheers Bar. It's like Sesame Street, the brick sidewalks. It's just it's such a cool city. It's a really
Did
cool
you do
city.
your
That's
audiobook
amazing.
while you were walking?
Yeah, now that would be impressive, but
It
no.
would, with the sound of the traffic and all that stuff would be so
Make
cool.
it very real, like very much just come have a walk with me and a talk with me.
Exactly. We do a little sightseeing in between chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea, actually. I should have done that.
I love it. Okay, so Allison, do you actually see clients?
I do. Yes.
Okay, so do you see it X amount a week? Is that kind of how you do that? Or you?
Yes, and much fewer. Since the pandemic, I do everything virtually. We kind of started this back and forth thing, and I also started writing a lot more, podcasting a lot more. So I try to create, and that's really a passion of mine too. I could have gone the academic route and become a professor, but that was I wanted to be a little more out of the box. So I get to do, I get to teach through my podcast, I get to write, and I get to see clients. I kind of do it in a proportional way. But yeah, I love it. It's great.
Awesome.
The best of all the worlds, it sounds like.
It is. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Can you give us some of the names of your clients? Do you think that's appropriate?
Oh, well, I think that is a fantastic question.
Yeah, just whenever you're talking about somebody, just drop their name. I think it'd be really great on this.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'll give you their
the
story,
worst thing
too.
they've ever done.
Yeah. Most recent moral failure.
That's always,
for them.
it's just good to know,
Yeah.
No wonder this is such a great podcast. Oh.
Totally. My mom's a therapist. She started working at Meredith Meyer years ago with Henry and John. And anyways, she would always, we would always go, so Mom, who is that? What was her name? Just always ask her name. Timothy. I can't tell you that. She would just. So that's
my kids do the same. They do the same. They love to try to trap me. Yeah.
Totally. Oh my god.
It got easier. It got easier when I went virtual. It was harder, but it's now that they've gotten older. It's like a game.
Love that. Yes, it's a total game. Us kids were like, I know.
Wow.
Oh gosh, Mom, what was her name again? She remember the one, Yeah.
So bad.
So bad. Okay, well,
my
Allison, this season we are talking about relationships with 10,000 Minutes and all the ways we can better show up for them, but how we can be more aware of walking with Jesus, not working for him in relationships. And a lot of times we're talking about how we come into relationships, how we love well. Something I want to focus in on is toxic relationships and how do we walk through life with these? How do we handle these? And then how to distinguish fact from fiction in our relationships. So, anywho, through the years as a therapist, I love asking this question. What patterns and themes have you picked up on when it comes to relationships? Essentially the good, the bad, the weird. Are there certain patterns that you're seeing? And again, names would be great.
This is going to be the whole time.
Yep.
The whole time.
Yep.
Yes. Well, let's see. It's funny, even if I made up a name, the possibility that I accidentally stumble across one that I actually know is dangerous. So I'm going to just completely zip that up.
Yeah, just use Tim on all of them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, see, there's this guy.
Tim was
he
bald.
Has this pattern.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh Oh my gosh.
Relationship patterns. Well, two categories of relationships I always look for to start off with. Are we in a healthy relationship that needs tweaks, that maybe there's some boundary fouls, there's some communication skills that are needed, or are we in a toxic relationship? So that's baseline, because you use very different strategies in both types of relationships. Most people don't understand. We either see everything as way too toxic when really it's just an issue of communication, or we don't understand that there is actually some toxic behaviors being used toward us, and we're trying to use normal strategies to work with toxic people. Doesn't work. So that's kind of the first layer when we're thinking about fact and fiction. I talk a lot, and I shouldn't feel this way, about the importance of naming. And that's what now
that's
it's
her
like,
book
we need
title,
to
just so
name.
everybody knows. That's her book title. I shouldn't feel this way. Okay. Yep.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yep.
I shouldn't feel this way.
Yep.
We feel some way. That's sort of the first step in the pattern, is like, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel annoyed with this person. I shouldn't feel like I don't like this person. I shouldn't feel like I don't trust this person. Well, I shouldn't feel this way is usually your cue to name something hard. Something is happening here. So the first part of the pattern is, I don't want to deal with this, or I try to guilt trip or gaslight myself out of the feelings that I have. So that's the first thing. Then we have to get to what is happening. This is the fact from fiction. And that's just the first baseline. Is something happening here that's roughly in the category of healthy, in need of tweaks, or is something happening here that really is toxic, and we need to talk about a different strategy?
That's so good. Where do you even start with identifying that? Because even in the context, I'm thinking as you're talking, like in marriage, okay, so we have these cycles, and at any given moment, we're somewhere in our cycle of like, okay, things are really great. And then, oh, he did something that made me mad. And now I'm carrying resentment because I'm not going to talk to him about it until it blows up, because that's how I operate. And then at some point it blows up, and then, it's a fight. How do you know? I mean, I would say I'm not in a toxic marriage. I know that on a baseline level, but some of the things you're mentioning, I'm like, but sometimes maybe it looks like one.
Absolutely, because we're humans.
Right.
Lisa Jo Baker endorsed the book, and she called it WebMD for your emotions. I do a lot of naming, because a lot of these toxic blame shifting, guilt tripping, even gaslighting, even being triangulating, I can go through what all those mean. We all do those things from time to time, and that doesn't make us toxic. We all manipulate from time to time. We all lie from time to time. This is being human. So what I would say is, I believe that health and a beautiful life and a beautiful relationship starts inside of you, and it starts inside of me. And that's the thing usually people don't want to hear. They want to go, what's wrong with this other person? What's wrong with the relationship? Well, what I mean by that is, I always say, name what's hard, start with yourself. What is happening inside of me is the most important first question to ask when discerning what's happening in a relationship. Now, I want to give that caveat. What's happening inside of me does not mean what did I do wrong.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It means I'm having a reaction. I don't like the way that this conversation just went. I feel yucky. What he said didn't land well. Before you even go into that, what's happening inside of me? It's self-awareness. It's emotional intelligence. It has to start inside of us. We cannot discern the health or the reality or the truth of what's happening in our relationship before we have discerned what's happened inside of us. Here's the thing. Let me give you an example. Let's say your husband says something that makes you really mad. You notice, man, I feel so angry right now. It could be that he said something that was really mean and he was a jerk in that moment and you need to confront him. It could be that he said something that was honest and that you needed to hear and you didn't like what you heard.
Yeah, probably that.
Two very different paths.
Yeah.
Right? And if it happens with our kids. They trigger us. If we don't stop and name what's hard, start with yourself. That's like the mantra throughout this book. Not with shame. You have to get rid of the shame, but I am so frustrated right now. What is that about? It's really this internal discernment. And sometimes as you learn to develop this muscle, you're like, yeah, I think they were being a jerk in that moment. Or I need to go back and ask them, what did you mean by that? Or it's like, oh, I think this one's on me. I think I was the jerk in that moment, right? So to discern fact or fiction in your relationship, now this gets tricky and it gets complicated, and I can dive into that. We have trauma responses, sometimes our emotions hijack us, but at baseline, our best way to discern the health of our relationships or what's happening in our relationships is to get really good at starting with ourselves and understanding our own responses and our own emotions. God designed us with an emotional life, a nervous system to give us cues about what's happening in our external world. That's a God-given part of our design.
Yeah, they're the revealers.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my friends was always talking about the glass box. Like, let's just put the thing in the glass box and just look at it. And that was so helpful for me, thinking that way.
Take it out in front of you. Yeah.
And that's so easy to say until I'm in those moments and I'm in a different part of my brain and I'm super pissed and hurt. Yeah. And I'm drunk as all get out on
That's
just
right.
my own emotion. Yeah. You were talking about there's one response where it's, man, she's just telling the truth to me. Or the other one is she's being lame to me. How do we distinguish those as we're taking it on ourselves? How do we say, I guess it could be both. Do you just have to take that and put it in the glass box? Is that kind of essentially what we're doing?
So I look at this as 3 practices, and I call them practices. There's no quick.
God bless you. Yeah.
There's no quick and easy, and really our model is Jesus. If you want to think about it, Jesus was the most emotionally intelligent human being. If you think about how Jesus maneuvered a room, he read toxicity, he read people's motives, he understood what was going on, and he reacted appropriately with emotion without sin. So we're on that road. It takes a long time to get there, and it's a practice. And I believe these are spiritual practices. And sometimes you have to do the deep work of healing. Sometimes we have big reactions that are more related to pain from the past than it is to present situation. That's okay. As you notice that's something you can heal. But even for anyone, these are spiritual practices. So to answer your question, that first awareness, naming, but then I bring in this process that is very kind of countercultural and unpopular because it's not quick. I call it framing. And this is where you set up a little place in between. You have your glass box, but you also need a place in between to reflect on it. It takes time. It takes time. And we don't like that in our culture. These were called liminal places. If you look back through religious studies throughout the Bible, these places in between. A place in between could be your drive home from work. Nobody commutes anymore. We're all virtual. But when we did, you're sitting in your car going, I need to reflect on the last time I saw my family, any conflict that occurred yesterday. What do I feel about it now? It doesn't have to be weeks, but it does have to be a place where you're reflecting on that emotional, on whatever that emotion or whatever that conflict was. And so I use this acronym for framing, where we're reflecting. The F is facts. What actually happened? What actually happened? Okay. And I mean, this is 101 kind of emotional intelligence, but it's hard to train yourself to do. I think our kids should be learning this, as early as they can, but we aren't taught this process of self-reflection. What actually happened? What are the facts? What are the facts? You know what the facts are? My husband came home from work and yelled at me about, I don't know, that's what happened. That's what happened. And then I lost it. Okay, those are the facts. We're just looking at it in that glass box, to use your metaphor. What actually happened? We can train ourselves to do that. But it takes setting up those places in between, those little pockets of time. It could be a walk around the block. Sometimes it's a deep breath when you're in the moment, just to pause ourselves and frame what happened. We have those skills. God designed us with those skills. We're compartmentalizing different parts of it. We're getting into different parts of our brain when we do that, right? We're bringing the prefrontal cortex online so that we're a little bit out of that emotional brain. And we're just asking ourselves those questions. What actually happened here? What was my response about? What am I telling myself about my response? I'm mad. What am I telling myself about being mad? I'm a bad person. So what I really want to go home and do is just please my kids so they're not mad at me anymore, instead of going home and saying, man, I made a mistake. We start to reflect on everything. Now, It's a lot. And so that's where in this book, I'm laying these out as 3 practices with lots of steps and tools. But these are practices I think that are essential for healthy relationships.
Yeah. I mean, 10,000 minutes, the whole point of 10,000 minutes is to practice the way of Jesus in the 10,000 minutes. And I get good at what I practice. Most of my life, I've practiced worry. Like that's actually something that I practice versus practicing trust. And so what's it look like to just say, okay, I'm going to start actually practicing trust this week. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's the first one, is the F is looking at the facts. I mean, that's hard to do. So I'm writing notes down here and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about, gosh, mostly this is with my kids these days. My kids are getting older. They're awesome humans, but I'm triggered so quick to a response that now is like what I'm actually practicing is this other response versus practicing stepping back, taking a little break and looking at this objectively. Okay. So what's next?
So the next one is roots. And so to your point, that's what I mean by the breath. Once you notice, you grow in the skill. And even if you can say, hey, give me a minute to your kids, and you don't have the right response, but you can at least pause yourself before that's a huge win. And I really want to say that for people who are listening, this is a practice. Also, if you have the rough response, you always go back and apologize. You can always go back and repair. It's just baseline.
Repairing, which is so important. And I'm working on that a lot in my life.
Yes.
And any things you'd have to say there as far as repairing, is it just, it's stating the facts, going, these are the things that happened. Let's just get that out there. Is that essentially repair and owning my part of the repair?
Yes.
Or owning my part of the facts, maybe?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Repair is, I've reflected on what happened. I've seen my own side of it. Here's what was happening inside of me. I'm sorry. This is not your fault. And you are not, the thing about repair is it is not your opportunity to sneak in. But if you hadn't done this,
right.
I wouldn't have done this.
Yeah. I felt like you're an idiot. And that was just, it's a
I
feeling.
felt like my response was warranted.
Yeah. I feel blank because you're an idiot. Yeah. And ugly.
Right. If you hadn't done this, it's a true repair is, listen, I shouldn't have reacted the way that I did. I shouldn't have. It was wrong. I'm sorry. What can I do to make it right? Especially with kids, we have to be that model. Now, it gets trickier, if you're in a relationship where someone else did do something wrong and you did something wrong and it escalated, that's a different, we can talk about that. But in general, a repair is, this is my part of it and I'm sorry. And that's it. And naming what I did that I wish I hadn't done.
My kids are little. My kids are 7, 5, and 3 right now. And I feel like a lot of times my reaction to something that they do is big and unwarranted because I'm low level riding a place of constant exhaustion, constant overstimulation, feeling over needed. Like everyone needs me for something at every moment of every day. And so then sometimes if they do something or they say something or they react a certain way, then I fly off the handle. And what I've been trying more often to do is to name, not even necessarily like what I did wrong. I mean, yes, that's part of it, but like, mommy's so sorry that I yelled. Even if like what I said, I still stand by. Like, I still think that was ridiculous. And this is a stupid thing to be screaming about. But like now I'm screaming too, Mommy's so sorry that I yelled. That must have felt scary for you.
Yes.
I'm working on my big feelings too. And learning how to control them. Like, and I wonder too, I catch myself doing this with my kids. And for whatever reason, it's so much easier to apologize to my kids than it is to apologize in my adult relationships. Like my relationship with my mom sometimes, my relationship with my husband sometimes, my relationships with some of my friends. I feel myself reacting and then building up these stories in my head of why they would have said something like that or why they would have operated that way. And there's this whole mountain of evidence I've prepared in my mind, as to why my reaction was like validated or, and instead I just feel like it would be so great if as an adult in my adult relationships, I could treat them more like I do with my little kids. Cause Tim, it's interesting hearing you talk about how right now this concept is hardest for you with your kids. And I wonder if that's because they are older and they are able to manipulate us more. And like, they're more maybe deceitful than like a 5-year-old would be.
I think they should know by now. That's
right.
And I'm like, okay, bro, you're like, you got body parts and stuff.
Right.
It's
this
time
is
to
not,
step it up.
You can't play the clueless card anymore.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But it's interesting to hear you talk about naming it and then apologizing for my part in the reaction of it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's this word, two things that come to mind. There's a lot here. That this word that's coming to mind is differentiation. And that's a big word. But what it means is learning your own agency. I cannot control anybody, especially in our adult relationships, our adult kids. I cannot control anybody else's reaction to me. Any brave step, that's the third practice, is courageous action. Any brave step I take to communicate, to apologize, to set a boundary, I am doing out of agency, and I do not need anything in return. That's differentiation.
That's the hardest part, I think, maybe.
It's very hard. I'll apologize as long as they're also going to apologize back.
Right.
Right. And now I want to be very clear. This is important. I'm not saying you should let people walk all over you. You shouldn't. Differentiation means, listen, inside of myself, this starts inside of us. That's what's so hard. We've been taught how to love God. We've been taught how to love others. We don't know how to have a strong sense of self. That's the topic of my second book, The Best of You. Christians don't even have a category for selfhood. Right. Selfhood. Jesus was a self. And we don't like that word because our culture has co-opted it and said it's all about the self. You do you.
Right.
And that's not. And so I always say this thing, selfhood, selflessness is it's never about me. It's never about me. I'll be a doormat. Selfishness is it's always about me. Selfhood is it's about me and it's about you. And it's also about me and it's also about you. And so when you have a strong sense of self, I do this all the time in my tricky relationships. You know what? I was wrong. I know this person is going to they're not going to apologize for their part in it. And they did have a part in it. That's part of the facts. I can see that. They're not someone who's going to see that. But I still, because this relationship is valuable to me, there's some good. It's not a toxic relationship. I need to take ownership of my part, but I also need to have a boundary to protect myself. It's nuanced. But when I get to that place and I'm like, listen, this is my part in this, and I'm doing that for me to be clear in my soul. I am not doing that to get a response. There is so much freedom in that. Conversely, when I set that boundary, therefore, I know in my heart that this can't be a two-way reconciliation. I get triggered. And so therefore, I now have to, I'll take responsibility for that. And I will also put in place the boundaries that I need so that that doesn't happen again. That's selfhood. That's agency.
What might a boundary like that look like?
Yeah. And what does that practice look like?
Yeah. So
I know. Kelsey doesn't know this. And
I don't know anything.
Caleb, her husband, actually texted me earlier. He's like, would you help with this? So thank you, Alison.
Yeah.
I'm here to serve.
It's so delicate. And I think most of the time we get very simplified versions of these. But so here's an example. You have a rupture with a parent. Maybe they do something. They guilt trip you. Maybe they triangulate, which means they put you in the middle. They dump on you about their problem with their friend or maybe another sibling or even your other parent. And you're in the middle of that, right? That's wrong. They should not do that. That is a boundary foul. And you finally explode and you're screaming.
Yeah.
And then you name that, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. And also what's also true is what they're doing, this pattern of behaviors, this triangulation, whatever it is, this manipulation is toxic. Let's name it. We're not saying the person is toxic in this case necessarily.
Right.
But that behavior is toxic. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to maybe say or show with my actions, listen, I shouldn't have, here's an example. I shouldn't have yelled at you. That was wrong. Then here's the thing. When you, and this is fair, when you dump on me about X, this person, when you talk to me about this person, it makes me I feel so anxious. There's nothing I can do with that. There's no good that comes from it. So in the future, I'm going to excuse myself from those conversations. I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to get off the phone. I cannot participate in those types of conversations with you. I love you. I'm sorry I yelled at you. Here's what needs to happen for me to take responsibility for my actions. Now, that other person ain't going to like that. They're not going to like that. But that's agency. That's selfhood. It's you taking responsibility for what's yours and then putting a boundary to protect yourself going forward. It's actually good for the other person because they shouldn't be doing that either.
Right.
They might not feel like that's good for them.
Yeah.
Now, that's a word boundary. Sometimes we can get into it. Sometimes you just have to let your actions speak.
Just by leaving the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just,
yeah.
Especially with parents, siblings, family members.
Uh-huh. You made a difference between a toxic person and a person with toxic actions.
I call it a spectrum of toxicity. Very few people are sociopaths, completely toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people are Jesus, completely healthy, right? Most of us fall somewhere in the middle, but some folks are more toxic than they are healthy. And I work with folks, where they have to sever ties with someone because the amount of toxicity, but how I would define that is a consistent, chronic pattern of harmful behaviors over time. No ability to take ownership and no good that counterbalances the bad. And that's a key feature. There are some folks who have really toxic habits and they also have some really good qualities. In those cases, you can quarantine the toxic habits and enjoy the good qualities. There are some folks where there's really no counterbalancing good qualities. And that's where we're going to talk about extracting ourselves from the relationship. Yes. Tim.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for pointing. Everybody, my hand was up. I felt like I did the right thing. I came from love. I drew my boundaries. I put my hand up. Okay. The first version of that you just said was, now I forget because I put my hand up and I was so excited that I did that. You said somebody has toxic behaviors, but you quarantine. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is you isolate, you name. That's why this book is WebMD. You name the behavior. Triangulation is a big one I hear all the time in families. People talk behind other people's back and they're venting. It's really toxic. Yeah. It's toxic when we do that. And so oh my gosh, this is what's happening. My friend dumps all of her frustration with our mutual friend on me and never talks to our mutual friend about those issues. I'm left carrying the baggage.
Yep.
But I also love my friend, and my friend shows up for me, and my friend will pick up the phone whenever I call, and my friend babysits my kids. This behavior is really toxic, and I got to figure out. So that's what I mean by quarantine. You start by naming it. Start with yourself. Don't go immediately to your friend and go, "Man, did you know this is toxic?"
So this is what's happening in me when she's, when Kelsey's doing this, talking about everybody else in front of me.
I know. Yeah.
I'm going to go to myself and say, okay, when she's doing this, I am feeling XYZ. I'm actually getting really frustrated because I love her husband and she or whatever. And this is not a real thing, everybody.
Let us take a break to say these are all hypothetical.
Yes, these are totally hypothetical. Yeah. But my reaction is I'm owning how it's making me feel, and when she's doing this, it's making me feel like this. I'm reacting like this, and if I was like, stop talking about other people,
right?
I've just yelled at her, and I can own my part.
What's wrong with you? Yeah.
Why do you always do this? You're so blah 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 blah. I give her a name, so then I'm owning that part, and then I'm saying that to her in this instance or not.
Okay, there's two things. Sometimes you just realize, oh my gosh, this is toxic. I haven't really done anything wrong. I need to set a boundary so that I remove myself from her behavior, not necessarily from her. A boundary is something you can do that you need nothing from the other person. It's not about going to her and saying, you do this. Stop. Maybe depending on the relationship, if she asks and says, hey, I've noticed a change. You try to have the conversation with her. But the boundary is, I am no longer going to do that. When her husband comes up, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You need to, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm going to excuse myself. And if she asks you about that, great. Try to have the conversation. But you've decided inside of you, I'm not participating. I don't need her permission. I don't need her to understand why. I can't do this anymore. That's quarantining a behavior. Okay. It's you're separating yourself out from that toxic behavior in whatever way that you have to do. It will change the relationship.
Yeah.
It will. If it's for the most part, healthy relationship, it might change it for the better.
Yeah.
If it's not, it's good to know that maybe you've been enabling some bad behavior.
Yeah. Right.
That requires core strength. I always
Right.
say boundaries require core strength. It's hard to be like Jesus, because this is exactly what Jesus did. He let people be accountable for their own behaviors. So that's the boundary. Now, listen, if in response to her toxicity, yes, you're acting out, then take ownership of it. Sure. Listen, I shouldn't have yelled at you the other day. Going forward, it's just best for me to bow out when you talk about your husband.
Yeah. Okay. So you said facts was the first one.
Yeah.
Can you go back through those real quick?
Yeah. So then you get into roots, which is more of the deeper need for change. So we're using sort of this triangulation example. It's like, what do I get from this? I kind of like being in the middle of the drama. Maybe there's a reason I facilitate, what's my part, maybe I've always been the one that, I got some self-esteem by kind of being the one everybody dumped on.
Yep.
So, and I bring that one in because sometimes the facts are there and it's like, but I'm not changing it. What's that about? So you got to look at the roots. What am I getting from this? Why do I want to change? What's the cost of change? It might be a little hard if suddenly I stop being this container for everybody's frustration or gossiping or, getting out of this, manipulative relationship. I'm going to feel a loss a little bit. I got something from that. That's really normal. This happens all the time. Yeah. Maybe this is how I feel like people like me. Yeah. Because I'm always available.
It's what I bring. It's what I bring to people.
It's the value that I bring. Yeah.
So you got to get to the root of what you've been getting from it. So you face the facts. I don't like this. This isn't good for me. You got to get to the roots. This is what I mean. It's a practice. We're going to be praying our journaling through this with God for a few days. This doesn't just happen, immediately. Yeah. We just start to notice, okay, but we're counting the cost. And when you do this framing, when it's time to take action, you'll have success. It won't be a one-off. Because a lot of people, they jump right into, we're not going to talk about him anymore. And then the next day we're talking about him again because you haven't done the work of getting to the root.
Yeah. I haven't done my work.
That's right.
On my side of the court. Okay. So facts, roots, what's at the root of how I see this?
That's right. And what I'm getting from it. Yeah.
And what I'm getting from it. Thank you. I'm writing that down. And then.
So we take a little audit of what have I tried in the past? Have I tried anything with this particular relationship? What's worked? It's an audit of strategies. Have I tried to change this in the past? What worked? What didn't work? You need to do the audit because often we've usually tried different things and there's a reason things haven't worked. And again, all of this is under kind of getting to the facts, getting to the truth. That's interesting. I try to change the topic. It doesn't work. Okay, so that's not going to work again. I'm going to have to do something different. I'm going to have to be more direct. Or, I've tried being direct and they just fight back or get mad. That didn't work. So I'm going to have to use action boundaries and just literally physically remove myself or use the buddy system, never be alone with this person.
Right.
That's good.
That is so good.
Just simple, actionable steps. This is what I like to hear. Things I can do.
That's brave. That's where we get into, once you've kind of framed it, you've done the audit, you've looked at the facts, you've looked at the roots, you've done the audit, mental messages. What are the messages that's M.
Come on.
What are the messages I tell myself about this? And here's a big one. I'm complicit. I've been part of this. So often we've been enabling behaviors. We've been a part of behaviors. We've been also dumping. And so it's like, well, I don't want to get healthier about this because they're going to be like, well, you've been doing that too. Well, yes. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I want to change. Yeah. But we got to get to the root of our own mental messages of how are we guilt tripping ourselves? How are we shaming ourselves?
So the difference between audit and messages is audit is still like a cerebral thing that we're just able to look at and observe.
The strategies we've tried.
Messages are the things that are actually being told to our hearts, to our souls, to our minds. We're telling ourselves what we've heard before, and we're just letting those things penetrate.
That's right. You can almost imagine or anticipate the messages you're going to tell yourself. I'm letting this person down. They need me. Or the messages they're going to tell me or have told me. You're the only one I have.
Right.
You're the only one who I can talk to. Oh, the guilt.
Yeah.
Right.
Even when what they're downloading on us is toxic.
This is hard. This is
It's hard.
This is tough.
That's I keep saying to people, especially about this book, I'm like, these 3 practices work and they are not easy. It is a way.
Yeah.
It is a whole way of really looking inside yourself and doing the work, because then E is expansion. You get help. You educate yourself. You find out, what have other people done that have worked? I've been trying to do this with my mom, with my brother, with my kids. It's not working. You expand, you get other ideas, because there's a lot of tools out there now. All of this is under framing, just so that when you go to take action, you've done the work and you're going to be far more effective. The problem with boundaries, everybody wants good boundaries. Everybody wants healthy boundaries. But what they don't understand is they start inside of you. You have to develop this core strength. Otherwise, they're going to be one-offs. So you're going to do it once, or especially in these hard, tricky situations, in these hard relationships. I think boundaries are a part of how we grow to be more like Jesus. And people don't understand that. We think about them as external with other people, but our boundaries really flow from what's important to me. What is God inviting me into? How do I become a healthier person? What are the facts? What are the roots? How am I contributing to some of these relationships? What strategies am I trying that aren't working? I need to be honest about that and face that. What are the ways I shame myself? All of that is the internal work of getting stronger. And this is how we show up in our relationships in a much more powerful way.
Okay, you guys, this totally reminds me of our episode with Marriage 365. So Casey and Megan, who run Marriage 365, they shared how their marriage was like in a mess. They're about to get a divorce. But once they started working on themselves, their marriage started to benefit from their inner work. And Christians get all bent out of shape like, ooh, well, this isn't letting God do work. I think that is a wrong way to see that. And it's worth just listening. That's all I'm going to say. And the benefit of this work is there's so much going on inside of us when we find ourselves in conflict. Like, there's so many things going on. And this invitation to pause and process the facts before responding is a game changer. Like, that's actually part of the practice this week. So let's take a moment to reflect on a tough relationship that you're in right now. Could be your marriage, or with your kids, or a coworker, maybe your boss, maybe a neighbor. So what are the facts that are happening, that are going on? What are the actual facts? And what might be fiction in that tension, in that conflict? Like what they're thinking, what they think about you, how they see you. What can you take ownership of yourself today? And then what could you do to better the relationship? And really, in all this, we're saying, Jesus, I want to join you in owning my part in this. It feels so much like boundaries are for the other person. It's like they're a douche, so I need to set this boundary because of X, Y, Z.
And I should also tell them probably while I'm at it that they're a douche, and then I'll set my boundary.
Right. But it's so outward, which it still could be outward. They still could be that, but we're not doing the work of like, okay, so what's going on in here? Not being curious about what's going on here, which I love this as a filter.
We want the other person to know they're a douche, which may be fine. But really what's more important is I don't want to be around someone who's a douche.
Right.
What is going to get me to action? I don't want to be around, because we can get hooked on that exchange. What I really want, what deep down in my core, is not to be around people who are douches.
Yeah.
And so I have got to do my own work to eradicate that from my life. And that's going to take some core strength.
Yeah.
So
Gosh.
good.
Okay.
There's so many good things in here.
Frame all day. And you kept saying there are 3 things. There are 3 practices. So help me out. And I'm slow in life. I mean, I'm good
And
looking.
framing is the first one, right? Framing is the first practice, but it's like...
It's actually the second one. The first one is name.
Okay.
You've got to name that something is happening. You got to
name was the first one. Frame was the second one.
Frame is going deeper. Why is this happening? What's my part in what's happening? What can I control? What can't I control? That's where how toxic is it? It's the deeper work of reflection. And then the third practice is brave. And that's where you take action. And this is why I really wanted to lay down all three, because sometimes in therapy, we do a lot of the framing and we understand everything all day long, but we don't want to go out and take action.
Yep.
But then when you get in the self-help world and you get into the meme world and the social media, it's all about action. Just cut them out, set the boundary, do the thing, but we haven't done the inner work. And maybe we're cutting off a relationship where we really could have had a more nuanced approach to it. And so that's the third practice is brave. What's my brave step? And there's a million brave steps, but you're going to pick, I talk about, you're at a crossroads, right? Something is hard. Something is hard. And if you imagine yourself at a crossroads, a busy intersection, right? What we want to do is blow right through and just hope that we find the right direction, right? When something is hard. But what I'm trying to teach you to do is stop. Name it. I am at a confusing intersection. Whatever's going on with my kids isn't working. I start yelling at them every single day. And then I apologize. That's great. I need to find a different path. It's going to take me a minute. I have to stop. I have to set up a place in between for myself. Maybe I see a therapist. Maybe I set aside time every single morning for the next 3 weeks to talk this through with God and with my husband. Something has to change here, right? Something has to change. And that's your framing work.
Yep.
If you do that framing work, you're going to see it. This is the way we're designed. You're going to go, oh, this is what's going on. I can change this whole thing. And actually, that's the path. And then I got to brave that path. Hey, kids, this hasn't been working for a couple of years. We're going to try some new things. Let's talk. And you've done the work. So it's not in the moment. Yeah. It's architected. Yeah. You are actually we're going to try something new here, right? That's brave. You're going to actually execute, but you're going to do it having done the work of gotten to the root of what's really going on.
So good. All the excavation's been done.
Yes.
Within you. And it's your kingdom is no longer threatened in spiritual terms. Dallas Willard always talked about what it would look like to live unoffendable lives.
Yes.
And which is so beautiful. If I'm seeking first the kingdom of God, and my kingdom or your queendom is not being so threatened all the time because we've done our work. It's like, I'm actually okay. Like I don't have to own these things, but
that is exactly the freedom that comes from you've counted the cost. And that's why, so maybe your brave path is not with your kids, but let's say with a relationship, I got to exit this relationship. Oh, that's going to be so hard. But just as you said, you've done the work. Yeah. You've examined your own messages. So every guilt or shaming strategy they throw at you, you've already confronted it. You already have headed it off. Yeah. And you're going to be successful. You're going to be successful. This is spiritual formation. This is human formation. It's becoming really strong, empowered people in a world that is messy. Not a lot of people really try to live in this way. And it's being integrated. And it's so freeing. It's so freeing. It's just such a great way to live.
I love that. So this is so dang practical. And thank you. Again, this whole point of 10,000 minutes is that I've heard, I don't know how many messages in my life, and I started counting them. And I'm like, gosh, I've heard so many. I don't know how to make this stuff practical in my actual week. Like I know these things, I'm a therapist's son, but what if I put them into practice? How different would life be?
Yes.
So these are so practical, and thank you so much. Is there just a thing that you are aware of during your day? Is there just like because I write an X on my wrist every morning for a few reasons. One, I woke up again. I shouldn't be here alive, but I am today. I'm so grateful. And the other one is just to join Jesus today, not work for him. And then the other one is like whatever practice we're doing as a community. So is there like a practice that you invite people into you just gave us the frame and the 3 practices, but is there just like an awareness that you're trying to walk through your day with?
Mine is, and it's, I love the X. That's beautiful. Some people need more tactical, concrete. I'm a word person. So mine is what I call journal naming. Name what's hard. I don't want to introduce a big new term here at the end, but I grew up doing what we call spiritually bypass. I never honored hard emotions. I would spiritualize them. So prayer for me was try to get yourself like, Lord, I love you.
Yep. Back.
And so as an antidote to that, what I give myself the gift of every morning is what I call journal naming. And I just name what's hard to God. God, I'm tired. God, I'm scared. God, I feel bad about that conversation. And I just little lines through my journal. And it's a gift I give myself to be seen by myself and God. It's just a little practice of what I call naming what's hard. And inevitably, I feel better. I just get it down. And so that's one practice. There's so many. I love what you're saying. But I just think this idea of bringing God in, I love what you're doing here. Another one I call comma God. When no matter what I'm thinking or ruminating on or worried about, I call it comma God. I just add a comma God and start telling God, oh, that, if I feel something petty, oh, that person, got more, attention than I did, or that mom, blah, 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 blah. God, and there's just sort of and it's just no shame. And it's really eradicated that shame. Like, oh, that's what I'm feeling right now. Isn't that interesting?
Totally. I mean, it's actually the practice. It feels like the spiritual practice after naming the hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Comma God. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm thinking too, just you could actually put these into your relationship with God as well. Like, God, I'm so pissed that I'm still not healed from this cancer. I'm so pissed that my daughter XYZ. I'm so pissed at you because XYZ. And I could still frame these things, find the root, do an audit of like, how am I seeing this? I really love that. I'm curious on what that would look like. That's beautiful.
I did a chapter. I shouldn't feel conflicted about God. My favorite is God. I don't really want to talk to you today. Frankly, I don't think it really helps. Comma God. It's just, I don't have time to do my prayer time today. God.
Yeah.
You're just naming what's hard with God. I love that. I mean, that is the practice. And I love that. I love how you said that. I totally wholeheartedly agree.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love that. I love that I wrote that chapter for you. So I feel really good about that.
Yes.
If you could add Tim's name. Yeah. Add his name to the book.
Just 10%.
Tim said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Alison with 1L. Thank you for being on here. And we're not done.
Oh.
So we've got an hour to go, and it's going to be really powerful. We've got something called 10,000 Thoughts. This is just, you're going to chuck out your quickest answer that you can.
Okay. Oh boy, I'm terrible at these. I'm a big
rapid question.
You know what?
I'm going to challenge myself.
Let's frame how you saw that really quick. Let's, again, come from love, draw the boundaries, and let's frame how you see that. Facts are, okay. Mental messages.
Good.
Yeah, well, okay, something on your bucket list. Go.
Yosemite.
Ooh.
Mine too.
Let's go, you guys. Let's
never been.
This. Oh. Alison, you've never been either.
Never.
Girls, you need to go take a trip with your people.
When did you get to see it?
Oh, I'm from the Californias, and so I've spent every summer
I forget that.
in Yosemite. Oh, you girls,
it's your old stomping ground.
Yeah, it's just whatever. Me and Half Dome. I actually climbed Half Dome as a kid.
Of course you did.
I don't want to brag or flex, but almost died. Okay, pet peeve.
Pettiness.
Not petting.
No.
Pettiness.
Pettiness.
Quick example.
That was the first thing. The first thing that came to mind. When people diminish other people.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. Last person that made you feel seen.
This is the first thing that came to my mind. God.
Swish. I'm just going to accept that one and believe there's a deeper answer there and not do a Jesus juke on that. Something you're currently rethinking.
Oh boy. Okay. I'm going to be honest. My theology of the atonement.
Awesome.
Love to hear more about that at some point.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about that.
Okay. All right. We're just going to leave it there.
Very cool.
Yep. We're going to leave it there. And I may not air this podcast because you're.
I was going to say.
You know what I mean?
Nothing too crazy.
No, I said anything goes. We've been taught
a lot of things. It's a complicated topic. It is.
Go
ahead.
So is God. So is
God. Right?
Yeah. Church, all the things. Okay.
Yes.
Favorite musician growing up or band? First one.
Amy Grant.
Come on.
Unguarded.
Do you have a song or a record? Oh, Unguarded.
Lead Me On. I still sing. When I drive.
Gosh, yes. Yes.
Lead me on.
Let's go, Amy. I mean, and if I could
Will
have
always
that jacket.
be good.
And if not her,
like
probably
my favorite jacket of all time. No?
The jacket was good. Yeah.
You remember.
Oh, girl.
I can't even picture what.
Oh, it was like
Leopard.
What is it called? Leopardy? Yeah. I mean, I pretty much had one. Okay. Your best joke. Do you know how to tell a joke?
I'm a terrible joke teller.
Me too.
Terrible.
So am I. My kids are great though, or they think they're great.
Do you know any jokes, Allison?
I mean, my dad tells a joke that it's horrible, but it's a terrible joke. Our last name is Cook. I've been a cook. Everyone, are you a cook? I've been a cook my whole life.
Oh my gosh.
It's the only joke I know.
Yeah, that's really strong and tragic. That's a strong way to end.
Strong and tragic.
Yeah. Allison, thank you so much. People can find you on all the socials.
Yeah. All
find
the things, Dr. Alison Cook. Yep.
And please go listen to her podcast as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I hope that was helpful or just got you thinking or rethinking a little bit. Our practice this week is actually rethinking your role and responses in toxic relationships. So here are a few bullet points or a few takeaways that just things that stuck out to me. So one is we learned the difference between a toxic action and toxic people and the concept of quarantining toxic behaviors. So if you didn't hear that, go back and listen because that was really striking. We learned how to frame, capital FRAME, a situation to get to the root of behaviors. That was very insightful. I might need to go back and re-listen through some of those. I loved when we pause and reflect on our part in these situations. It helps us repair relationships through boundaries. There are those boundaries again. So again, the practice this week is rethinking your role and responses in toxic relationships. There are always two sides to every story, and sometimes we choose to only see our side in our relationships. I mean, that is me all day long. I see my side. So rethink your role and responses. There's an invitation to pause and process the facts before we respond. What can you and I take responsibility for today? On our side of the court, what can we just own? And what do you have the power to communicate or to change? I love that. What do we have the power to communicate or change? Some of us, it's super easy. Some of us, that's really difficult. Some of us need to be a little bit gentler with how we do that. Some of us need to actually jump up there and say, Jesus, I'm joining you as I communicate this. So in all things, we're saying, Jesus, help. Let us know how these practices are going for you. Please go to our Facebook group. I love responding to a bunch of your thoughts and things that you're learning. And the link is in the show notes for all the things, for our text messages, all that stuff. If you're giving to 10,000 minutes, thank you. We'll be sending a special email out and saying thank you and just hopefully it as an encouragement. So let's practice this stuff as a community. Don't do this by yourself. Please do this with somebody else. And feel free to share this podcast and what you're learning with friends and just with your people and with us. So thanks for listening, guys. Really appreciate you all.